Welcome to the procrastination, and today I'm going to show you how I made a 4x6 glitter journal. Ooh. Ah. So I'm a graphic designer, and I really like to do a wide variety of projects because I love art in many forms. When I was in college, years ago, how many years is that now? I am old. Ooh. Back in my college days, I had actually taken a bookbinding intro class. And though I don't remember some of the more challenging bookbinding methods, I definitely remember some of the basics. So this is going to be a very basic bookbinding video. I'm going to just try to remember what to do as I go along. I'm just going to see if I can make a little journal out of the materials that I already have in my craft room. The plan is to make this a 4x6 journal so that the journal isn't too small, but it's just big enough for me to be able to use an 8.5 by 11 sheet to cover the entire cover of this book. You'll need the following materials: 8.5 by 11 chipboard. I bought a pack of 25 from Amazon. It wasn't that expensive, I think $10 or $15. You're going to need paper or fabric to use as the cover for the book. I'm going to use 8.5 by 11 sized glitter paper. This is a little on the thicker side. It's a little close to cardstock, so it's going to be nice and sturdy. You need some kind of paper to fill the inside of this book. What I'm going to do is use this 5 by 7 pack of cardstock that I got from Paper Source. This is like a shimmery invitation paper that I also didn't end up using for another project. So you need some kind of glue in order to put all these pieces together. Professional bookbinders use a glue called PVA, which is polyvinyl acetate, I think, and its purpose is to be a low acidic glue so that it doesn't dye your paper yellow when you use it. Now, I used to have PVA glue. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere in this room. It's lost to the world right now, though. So in the meantime, we're going to substitute it with a couple of different glues. I'm going to use Elmer's glue, which is a glue stick, and I'm going to use this to put together the pieces to the chipboard itself. So I'm going to use this to put all the cover pieces together. I'm going to use a glue called Mod Podge to glue together all of the interior pieces because the book pages need to be glued together in a single block. Now, in order to use Mod Podge, you're also going to need a little paintbrush. I'm just using a flat-edged paintbrush. Nothing special. You need something to cut with because we're going to be cutting our pieces to size. And so that also means we're going to need a handy ruler. I'm also going to be using a couple of bookbinding materials that I have left over from my bookbinding classes in college. First, I'm going to be using this handy tool, which is called, what's this called again? This is called a bone folder, and it is a dull-edged tool that's used to make folds and creases in bookbinding or in many different kinds of crafts. I'm also going to be using metal spacers that I got from my class. These were pre-made tools so that you don't have to go through the hassle of measuring anything with your ruler. This one is a 1/2 inch wide, and this one is a 1/4 inch wide. You guys are also going to need a stack of paper. I have a stack of tabloid-sized paper, 11 by 17. This is purely to keep your workspace clean. I'm going to be using a lot of glue, and you need to put glue all along the edges of the materials. So you don't want that glue to get onto the table, because then that's going to transfer onto the cover of your book, and it's not going to look nice anymore. So you need to use these to cover up the table so that you can just get glue on this, and then you can just toss this away afterwards.
I started with the paper for the inside of the journal, which is called the paper block. This paper is 5 by 7 inches, so I want to cut it to 3.75 by 5.5 inches, so it'll be a little smaller than the covers, which will be 4 by 6. I added pages until the paper block was 1/2 inch thick. I then grabbed 2 8.5 by 11 inch sheets of shimmer text paper, folded them in half, used my bone folder to smooth the fold, and cut out 3.75 by 5.5 inch rectangles. I put one piece on both sides of the paper block. Now I want to glue the block together. I tapped a side on the table to make the paper line up, and then I laid it on the table with about 1/2 inch hanging off the side. I put scrap paper on top to keep it clean, and then placed a few heavy things I had laying around on top of it to keep it from moving and to keep it compact. Using my paintbrush, I painted over the edge of the paper block with Mod Podge to glue the paper together. I applied a decent amount of glue here, and I also painted in many different directions, so I got the glue into every little nook and cranny. Now we leave this paper alone for a while so it can dry completely. I'd say let it dry for at least a few hours. In the meantime, I'm going to make the book cover. I cut out 2 pieces of 4 by 6 inch chipboard for the front and back covers. We know our spine should be 1/2 inch, so I also cut out a book spine that is 1/2 inch wide by 6 inches tall. Next, we finally get to work with my pretty glitter paper. I flipped it upside down and placed the chipboard pieces on it. I decided to make a 1 inch thick spacer out of chipboard so that I can space everything out on the paper evenly. You may want to make a 1/4 inch spacer as well. I laid scrap paper down and put my chipboard on top, then used the glue stick to completely cover one side of the chipboard in glue. Moving that aside, I laid another piece of paper down and then my glitter paper, then covered the paper in glue also. I lined up my 1 inch spacer to the edge of the glitter paper, then lightly placed my first chipboard cover piece next to it. I moved the spacer to the bottom of the piece to make sure I was laying it straight. After that, I used my bone folder and applied pressure on the chipboard to make sure the glue bond is good. Next, I used my 1/4 inch metal spacer and then placed the book spine next to it. Then I used my 1 inch spacer again to make sure the pieces are lining up. I used my 1/4 inch spacer once more and then placed the second chipboard cover piece, then used the 1 inch spacer again. I applied pressure to the chipboard with the bone folder again, then I used my 1 inch spacer to cut excess paper from one side. Next, I made another spacer, this time with 3 pieces of chipboard glued together. This is for the next step, which is to cut the corners off of the cover paper. This is done because you need to have less of the cover to fold over and layer and glue. This tool is so that I can leave some of the paper to overlap the chipboard. Otherwise, if you cut right next to the chipboard, once you fold the cover over, it will have exposed chipboard, and that won't look polished. Using this spacing tool, I lined it up as symmetrically as I could and cut all 4 corners. So next, I pre-folded the tabs, then I grabbed another piece of scrap paper and laid my covers on top. Then I applied glue to the paper and also on the chipboard. I held the book and gently folded the paper over with the chipboard. Using my bone folder and another scrap paper, I folded the paper tab over and applied pressure to the side, then rubbed the bone folder over everything. I did this for both sides, then I used the pointed edge of the bone folder to push down the small overlapping flaps of paper. You want to do this so the paper lays flat after you fold it, otherwise it may stick out after you finish folding. After that, I finished folding over the last two sides of the cover, then I rubbed the bone folder over each side of the spine and tested closing the book. It looks good so far. I wanted to cover all exposed chipboard, so I cut a 5.5 by 9-inch rectangle out of shimmer paper and glued it to the inside cover. It's not perfect, but it works. I placed a scrap paper piece on the cover and then laid extra chipboard and a few heavy items on top to make sure the cover will dry flat. Leave that to dry for a day. Afterwards, I checked it out and it looks great. I tried folding it to make sure everything looked even. Now I'm going to attach the paper block to the inside back cover. The paper block dried nicely and it looks like a pretty good bond. I needed to glue the last page of the paper block to the back inside cover. I put the paper block in place, then I flipped it over and covered the last page in glue. Then I carefully flipped it back over and placed it onto the center of the back inside cover. I used a ruler to measure its distance from the edge to make sure it was even. Then I let that dry for a bit with some weight on top. I thought about stopping here because it looks finished enough, but I decided I wanted to add a pocket sleeve to the front to tuck away the front page. So first I cut a 3 by 6.5 inch rectangle out of my shimmer text paper. Then I used my 1/4 inch metal spacer and drew a line a 1/4 inch from the edge on the short sides and one long side. Then I lined the paper up for an angle cut on my cutting mat and cut off the 2 corners on the long side. Then using my 1/4 inch metal spacer again, I lined it up to the edge of the paper on the long side I cut and the short sides and very lightly ran my box cutter along the lines. This is to just score the paper. I didn't want to cut all the way through the paper. I just want to make a light cut so that when I fold the paper, it'll fold easily and look nice. You can see the paper scoring here. Next, I folded the paper where I scored, unfolded it, and then applied glue to the tabs. I inserted the front paper from the paper block into the pocket, lined it up to the inside front cover, and closed the journal gently to get the pocket sleeve to glue in the right spot. Then I used the bone folder to apply pressure to the pocket sleeve. I cut out about 1/4 inch of the paper block paper and then inserted it into the pocket sleeve. I let the whole thing dry for a day and then ta-da, it's all done.
All right, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. We love you. Bye.